Redditors who got to live out a sexual fantasy and had it go horribly wrong. What happened? My good friend who is a huge 50 Shades fan mailed me some glass Benoit balls, with instructions to insert them, wear them out dancing with my BF so they'd get me all turned on, and then surprise him with my newfound kinkiness when we went home. Thankfully I decided to test run those suckers beforehand because either I did something wrong or I have a cooch like a bear trap. They went in just fine, felt pretty nice when I walked around, but I could not get them out. I tried everything, including, in a moment of desperation, a plastic spoon and a syringe full of lube. Nada. After several hours I become more and more panicked and called the nursing hotline at my school. The nurse on the phone assembled a team of other amused nurses who fired off suggestions like squat in the bathtub and poop. And use suction from your vacuum hose. None of their suggestions work, and now I'm in an absolute frenzy. The Benoit balls had been in about 10 hours, and I was beginning to worry that I'd need to go to the ER. Finally, one nurse suggests the ultimate embarrassment. Does your boyfriend have long fingers? Can he come over and help? So yeah, I called my boyfriend to come fish Seg's toys out of my vagina at 2 a.m. But this story gets better because as he's driving over, one of the phone nurses suggests I sumo squat and hop down the stairs one at a time. Shockingly, this actually worked. The horrible little glass balls of embarrassment came plinking out onto my hardwood stairs, just as my boyfriend walks in, and witnesses me crouched in a birthing position, naked from the waist down, covered in lube, crying, and these glass balls rolling noisily down the stairs into my living room. Stick to what you know, y'all, and don't take Seg's advice from 50 Shades of Grey. What is it like to be horny from a girl's perspective? You know that feeling you get in your chest when you drink something warm on a cold day? I feel like that, but in my pelvis. I saw this thread and thought I was born for this because I have the biggest SX drive of anyone I know, but then I realized I didn't have anything interesting to say that hadn't already been said. Clit gets bigger, feels more sensitive, and warmth from the rush of blood. Sometimes I can feel my pulse through my vag, which is cool. It starts as a really warm tingle across my entire pelvis. Everything becomes hypersensitive. Any touch across the back of my neck or stomach will make me groan and shiver. I want to be touched, caressed, spanked, and licked all over my body. The hornier I get, the more the tingle changes into an ache. I want something in me and I want it now. By this stage, I'm just soaked. I love to be teased. Tease me and I'll absolutely beg to get effed. It's the most frustrating, arousing, hot feeling ever. And the moment when he first slides inside you with no resistance because you're just so wet. MMMH, tingly and wet. When you want to touch yourself but can't because you're in class is the worst. Rubbing your thighs together just give you a tiny pleasurable sensation. I've always just felt warm, vag-wise, and it just kinda spreads to everywhere the longer it goes on. You know the weird feeling you get when you have goosebumps? I get that on my thigh/waist and have this desperate need to be touched. It's even better when I'm already cold because then I just start imagining how warm and snuggly it would be to have somebody hold me or something. And it's just like man, I don't even care about who it is anymore, just do it. Chefs, what red flags should people look out for when they go out to eat? I went through a Taco Bell one time and wound up with a Mountain Dew that tasted funny. They told me they had just cleaned the machine and that might be leftover cleaner. A few days after that I was talking to a friend that worked there that told me they had just found a dead mouse in it. I still remember when I was night manager at a sandwich shop and decided to clean the soda machine. It was probably the first time that thing had ever been cleaned. And the floor drain below it was like nothing I've seen since. Ugh. If a restaurant has a huge menu, it's all frozen. Pastry chef here. As much as people say avoid specials, I can't speak for everyone, but at least in dessert/breakfast pastries, if you see something new it's worth trying. Chances are it's something the chef has been working on for weeks on their own time. There's a lot of love and effort put into it. Also, the standby if the menu is a book, it's probably not great. The biggest thing to keep an eye on though emo is the staff. If there's pissed off people, get out as fast as you can obviously. If everyone is kinda apathetic and not talking to each other much, get out. That's also a she environment. Everyone is probably really passive aggressive, and that's going to show. If people seem genuinely good with being there even if it's busy or if there's playful ragging going on, that's where you want to be. The better the staff gets along, the better everything in the place runs. Cook for a small Mexican restaurant here. I always look for how the staff interact with each other. If they all seem to enjoy being there, and coordinate well, more often than not it's because everything is running smoothly and they have a good system, which usually means they know what they're doing and you can expect good food. That's how it always is for the smaller, family-run restaurants I frequent anyway, which I believe always have the best food. What was your effort? I'm done moment. I was about 16 or 17, at my first decent part-time job. It was a small franchise/chain store in my hometown. I'd been there for about a year, which made me, laughably, one of the more senior part-timers on staff. Over a long holiday weekend, I was working, alone, for a full-day shift. I had a list of tasks to complete, several of which I'd done before, which my supervisor figured would take me all day. I was being paid time and a half since it was a holiday, and the store's owners were very conscious of this. I managed to get everything done by midday, and proceeded to do more busy work. Stacking, folding, taking out garbage, inventory, labeling, everything I could imagine would be useful. My next shift was the following weekend. When I arrived, the owners asked to speak with me in the office. I came in, and one of the owners asked me to sit. He was a very short, fat, Italian chap who had a reputation for power trips. The chair was on its lowest seating position. I was berated for being lazy on my last shift. Apparently one of the other supervisors caught me reading papers, my list of tasks, and standing around, labeling, or simply sweeping, cleaning, instead of doing any real work. The owner railed on me, telling me this was unacceptable. His speech ended with a typical "this is not the kind of attitude you should have if you want to keep working here. F this," I thought. Then it came to me in a flash. The words I'd wanted to utter throughout his tirade. And so I said it. "Well, I don't anymore." The owner's eyes bugged out. He ordered me to repeat myself. I did, and said I'd have my 2 weeks notice in by the end of my shift. He told me to leave. Now. I got up, stood in front of him and smiled, handed him my passkey, and strolled out to the parking lot. The drive home that day was one of the sweetest feelings I've ever experienced in my entire life. What's the SZiest moment you've seen by accident? In my junior year of high school, our class took a trip to snorkel and scuba dive in Key Largo, Florida. At the location we stayed there was also an underwater hotel for guests. When we first got there we had to learn how to properly snorkel. The scuba divers had already taken a course on scuba, and we learned near the underwater hotel. So as we were practicing all the kids started hanging out in one area and spending more time than normal underwater. One of the instructors swam over near us and dove down to see what all the kids were looking at. A couple had rented the underwater hotel room for their honeymoon and were doing what newlyweds do on their honeymoon, with the curtains open. So the instructor, in an attempt to warn them of the 40 or so high schoolers watching them, tapped on their window. When they finally noticed the woman had a look of fear on her and ran to close the curtains while simultaneously attempting to cover herself. The man on the other hand appeared to be in shocked silence, but just as the curtain was pulled shut he appeared to have a look of pride, like he was bragging about his incredibly attractive wife to a bunch of high schoolers he would never again meet. We then had a class meeting about how it is improper to watch people have sex. One year in my mid-20s, I lived next door to a family in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Their daughter came home from college that spring. My bedroom window faced hers. She used wooden blinds that were more or less completely transparent. Each night, before bed, she would just stand knock-d in front of her mirror, or sometimes she'd sit on the edge of her bed and face the mirror. That summer she studied her own body closely, and I guess I got to know it pretty well, too. I got fired for laughing at my boss's disabled daughter. I had been with the company for 3 months and was still on orientation. My job was sales/advertising. Everything was going great, until last week, when we were scheduled to have our quarterly retreat. Since we were the main regional office in the area, all of the employees from the satellite locations came to our office for the retreat. The owner of the company rarely visits our office. He's been overseeing the setup of a new satellite office for the last year, according to my coworkers. But he was there for the retreat, as was his disabled daughter, Amy. Not her real name, for the sake of privacy. One of my coworkers told me Amy works at one of the satellite offices and I probably wouldn't have much interaction with her, but I should be nice. That seemed like a no-brainer. I'm nice to everyone, regardless. I won't claim to be an expert on Amy's disability, but it seemed like she had childlike mannerisms and struggled with expressing herself. She also had some problem with motor skills. I'll describe the only interaction I had with her prior to the incident. I went to refill my coffee and Amy was in front of me, getting her coffee. I watched her struggle with getting condiments added and putting the lid on, so I politely asked if she needed any help. She thanked me, said she did, and let me finish making it. While I was making it, she said she hated coffee, but her dad made her drink it because she had to, in a loud voice, always alert. I smiled, said that was definitely important, and handed her the cup. She thanked me again and went back to the office her dad was using, where she had been most of the day. I felt like I had been a good Samaritan and went on my way. Most of the retreat is team building exercises. Prior to the incident, Amy only participated in the puzzle race, where groups put puzzles together without the box art to see which team can finish faster. Amy wasn't in my group, so I didn't have any interaction with her there. Neither of our teams won. The big event, and the one that everyone seemed the most excited for, was the last activity of the day. Our boss gave us a list of potential clients. We were supposed to select 3 as a group, and put together something to attract the customer. We were told we would be judged on our creativity. My group explained that we could do pictures, slogans, jingles, whatever we wanted. Each person expected to work on one individually, then work with their group to polish it up before it was presented to everyone. It was kind of a big deal because at previous retreats, there would be clients on the list the owner was already close to bringing on board, and if you impressed the owner, you might just land that account. I went with a jingle, rhymed a few words, and recorded it. It was silly but fit the brand. My group gave me some pointers, we made some improvements, and I recorded the final product for submission. I helped my team with their projects until it was time to turn everything in. After everything was turned in, we gathered in the big conference room to critique each other. The owner went through them one by one. If it was a picture or storyboard, he'd put it up, read it, and we'd make comments, good or bad. There were some that were great which drew a lot of compliments, and some that were really bad, which we laughed about as a group. You could tell the senior account managers didn't care much about the exercise or put much effort into their pitches. Nobody seemed to get upset or offended, regardless of the feedback. When my jingle was played, it got a lot of comments, not all of them good, and I took the feedback with a smile. After getting my feedback, I felt a little more comfortable about sharing my thoughts on other presentations. I gave what I thought was valuable feedback to a few products, laughed at a couple others, and then a rather crude drawing was put up for the exact same company I had chosen. I immediately joked that well, at least my jingle was better than that. Did a 3-year-old draw it? And laughed, to absolute silence. I was really confused because plenty of people had made jokes and everyone laughed. Instead, a few people looked at me like I was disgusting and the owner said, well, if you don't have anything nice to say, keep it yourself, maybe? Then my boss scooted down to where I was sitting and told me I needed to go to my desk. Now, I noticed as I was gathering my things that the owner's daughter was red-faced and starting to tear up. The team building exercise was over for me. I went back to my desk and it began to sink in that the drawing must have been drawn by the owner's daughter. There was no warning or anything. The owner didn't reveal who put together what we were looking at until after a few critiques. Maybe I should have known? Everyone was joking and having fun up to that point. Someone else had a pretty bad drawing that got laughed at. Either way, I felt awful. As soon as the event was over, I approached my boss to apologize. He told me to wait for him in his office. Long story short, I was fired. My boss said since I was still on orientation, he had decided I wasn't a good fit for the company, so it was better to let me go now. He didn't outright say I was being fired for making fun of her drawing, but that's literally the only thing that I've ever gotten in trouble for. My work, up until that point, had been praised. I didn't get much time to process it because my boss had already called security, who showed up fairly quickly, and escorted me to my desk to gather my things before escorting me out of the building. An hour later, I got a call from one of my former teammates, who asked if I wanted to join the team for a drink one last time. They needed it after the retreat, and felt bad that they didn't warn me. I wasn't feeling up for it, but I wanted to try and make sense of the whole situation. So I went to the bar. In the back of my mind, I was thinking that since I'm about to start looking for a new job, a few references from former coworkers wouldn't be bad since I definitely won't be getting one from my boss or the owner of the company after everything that happened. The team explained that Amy comes to all of these retreats, and she always does some crude drawing like that. Everyone just sort of knows to say nice things about it, and move on. One of my teammates said that once you've seen one of her drawings, you know what to look for. Well, I didn't, and nobody warned me. I started to get pretty upset that this was a known thing and everyone knew but me. But what could I do? I had already messed up and it cost me my job. The team also shared more about Amy. Apparently she works at one of the satellite offices but doesn't really do anything. The people in charge of the office try to come up with stuff for her to do because she gets upset when she's bored. The team said the way the people who work there described it, they were basically her babysitter so she wouldn't bother her dad all day when he spent most of his time there. And after he moved on to establish the new satellite office, he didn't take Amy with him because she liked all the friends she had at that office. They also said that her dad had harassed a few single guys at the office to take her on dates, which seemed pretty damn HR inappropriate, but he does own the company. My team said Amy desperately wants a boyfriend and wants to get married, which she talks about all the time. The consensus seemed to be that there's no way she actually understands how relationships or marriage works, and her dad probably put this idea in her head to begin with. One of my teammates did joke that it wasn't a bad deal, because whoever married her would inherit the company since she is the old man's only kid. I wasn't really in the mood for jokes at that point after losing my job over one, so I told them I needed to go. The only good thing is my former team members did say they would gladly give me a reference if I needed it, since they felt so bad about not telling me about the Amy situation to begin with. Oh, and the cherry on top? Amy sent me a Facebook friend request over the weekend. I haven't accepted it. I already upset her and it cost me my job. Part of me wants to accept it, apologize, and block her, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that either. I'm going to take a few days to get myself together and then get my resume out there. My stepdad found something after snooping in my apartment. So about a week ago I, 22F, asked my parents, 47 and 40F, if they could stop by my apartment just to check on my dog who had been sick while I was at work. My mom agreed and everything seemed fine. They went over, gave my dog his medicine and took him for a walk. Today though I went to my parents' place for dinner and my stepdad refused to speak to me or even look at me. Eventually I finally asked what the problem was and he went off. Apparently he had been going through my things, and when he went into my bedside drawer found my toys and contraceptives. He yelled at me and told me that I was a disappointment and foul for having those things and that he didn't raise me for 17 years for me to become a deviant whore. I stood there absolutely shocked and bright red from embarrassment as my younger brothers and grandparents were in the next room and could hear him. I yelled at him for invading my privacy, telling him that I am an adult woman and that he had no right to go through my things in an apartment I pay the bills in. I have banned him from my home and have now blocked him. My mom says that I'm being dramatic and that it just caught him off guard to see those things, but my brothers think I'm right to be angry. So Ida, edit, just to clarify, he's been very abusive in the past, which came about after I started hitting puberty. Me growing up and maturing always seemed to be an issue. Also my toys and such were in my bedroom on my bedside table, so not anywhere he should have been. Update, here's a more positive update for everyone. My mom and I met for breakfast this morning. The first thing she did was apologize, and tell me that I had every right to act the way I did and that she should have been in my corner. She's looked into divorce, but I have 2 brothers who are underage, and because she works so much and travels for work she is afraid she will lose my brothers and have to pay 16 years of alimony. Update 2. I got home today after reading all these comments. Thank you everyone for your amazing support, and I found that 2 of the rubbers had been opened and 1 had a hole in it. I got rid of them and my FWB went and got new ones for us. Thank you for the people telling me to check them. Getting pregnant would be excruciating for me because of my AS and my endometriosis. I cleaned all my toys just to be safe and took the spare keys from my parents. I'm breaking up with my childhood best friend because she's marrying the guy she's been cheating on their whole relationship. I've known my best friend since we were 8 years old, we're now 22. She's been dating this guy for 3 years and I'd say for about 70% of their relationship she's been cheating. In the beginning she cheated with so many guys and there was even a point where she got chlamydia and she told her boyfriend that she had her period and they couldn't have intercourse and he was so clueless he suspected nothing. I met him for the first time and he is such a great guy, he treats her right and takes great care of her. He's white and she's black. In the beginning his family was racist towards her and he literally chopped his family down and told them stop being racists or I won't be a part of your lives anymore, and that's only a little bit of how he's always stood up for her and protected her, never made her get a job or anything. As their relationship progressed they moved in together and my friend told me a story about how her boyfriend and her lived next to the maintenance man of their apt complex, so they became good friends with him and always invited him over to hang out. She told me how she was cheating with a guy who was living in the same complex as them and one day the guy needed work done on his apt and the maintenance man that was her neighbor showed up and she hid under the covers while the maintenance man was there. I asked her how she can do something like that and just be okay with it. Throughout their whole relationship she always said she felt guilty and I told her she should just leave him. I felt guilty too because I've had the opportunity to tell him but never did. My loyalty have just always been to my best friend. About half a year ago I just stopped talking to my best friend because of how she treated her boyfriend. In November she messaged me and told how she and her BF are engaged and she stopped cheating on him. I blew up and called her a piece of shit and asked her, does he even know the shit you've done? I told her to come clean to him before you get married, at least let him be the one to decide. She said no because she is not cheating anymore. She blocked me on all social media and even blocked me from all of his social media. I wonder what she told him. We have a few mutual friends who I haven't told anything to. I've been radio silent when people ask why we are not friends anymore and it's just been eating at my brain since she told me they are getting married. It just sucks when someone who you have known for so long is not who you thought they were.
Men of Reddit, what prank did you pull at the girls' sleepover? I decided to pretend to be gay. Yep, I went all out to convince them that I was just one of the girls. Nightfall came, and the slumber party was in full swing. Little did they know, I had a prank up my sleeve that would go down in history. As the girls dozed off, I stealthily made my way around the room. One by one, I pulled down their sheets and poured water all over their bums. But wait, that wasn't enough for my mischievous mind. With a mischievous grin, I reached into my bag and pulled out a rather large sausage. Yes, you heard me right, a sausage. With careful precision, I stuck that sausage right where you can imagine. Oh, the audacity. But I wasn't finished just yet. I whipped out my phone and captured their unsuspecting slumber, taking pictures that would make their jaws drop. With the evidence safely stored on my phone, I couldn't resist the urge to share my triumph. So I uploaded those pictures onto a homemade Reddit page, letting the world in on our little prank-filled adventure.
I had intimacy with my twin brother's girlfriend after he died. My twins unaliving was one of the most impactful parts of my life. Being only 14 at the time, it was confusing, heartbreaking, and completely changed my perspective on life. I had never experienced the death of a loved one, so my first death being my brother was extremely tough for me. My parents became increasingly concerned about me and my mental health, so she always filled our flat with people close to my brother to make me feel supported. One of these people was my brother's girlfriend. She lived nearby and had been dating my brother for about a year, so I saw her a decent amount, but in the months after his death she came over almost every day for supper. Like me, she took his death pretty hard. We would comfort each other by talking about our favorite things to do with him, listen to his favorite songs, and would do anything to make it feel like he's still here with us. One night, while doing this exact routine we had for months, we started talking about their relationship. Being young and innocent, I barely understood the concept of a relationship, so when she told me they were intimately active, I was stunned. I started bombarding her with questions, all of which she answered with little detail. After finding this out though, it was hard for me to live knowing there was a side of my brother I never got to see and only she got to see. Over the next year or so, she became more willing to talk about the details that I was dying to know. The more time went on, the more details I got, and the closer me and her became. It being a few years after his death now, she was an open book with me. We discussed her struggles with dating after my brother's death and how it's hard for her to even imagine herself being with someone else after what she had been through. One night in late winter we had come home from an outdoor concert. It was the type of cold where you could feel it in your bones. I ran to my room to grab blankets and proceeded to cover ourselves on the couch. She cuddled up towards me as we watched some TV and attempted to warm ourselves up by my tiny electric fireplace. It felt so natural that I had barely even noticed that what we were doing was probably abnormal. As usual, we start discussing her relationship issues and she mentions how cuddling on me felt like she was with him again. She started crying, which made me start to tear up. I embraced her more as she talks about how much she misses his touch. I would also like to note that throughout all this, I did not have intimate feelings towards her whatsoever other than a fleeting thought here and there. At this point though, things started to get somewhat heated, despite me not realizing it at first. She slides her hands under my sweater to embrace me tighter and simply asks, "Can I?" At this point I realize what she's starting to imply and we started kissing. The more we did it, the more passionate it became. We had sex that night and it was the most natural good feeling thing I have ever experienced. This evolved into a full-on intimate relationship that was cut short by me having to leave for uni. However, it seemed that whatever she got from our short-lived relationship helped her get over my brother, as she was in a relationship shortly after I left. She also seemed to be much happier from the few conversations we've had since. Our relationship also helped me cope with his death in a weird way since she was there for me throughout my entire grieving process. It felt like closing a chapter on a tough time in my life. When I visited a few months later, she was in a relationship with a man who looked almost exactly like my brother.
How did you end up having intercourse with one of your friend's mom? I was in a fraternity in college and ended up sleeping with a mom of one of my fraternity brothers. One night, I matched with a woman on the app who seemed intriguing. We chatted, and she revealed that she was older, a mom, and wanted to have some fun away from her responsibilities. I was curious and found it amusing, so we decided to meet at a nearby bar. After a few hours, she invited me to her place, and my adventurous side took over. The thought of experiencing something forbidden thrilled me, but little did I know that this would take an unforeseen twist. As we reached her home, she hesitated, and her expression shifted to something I couldn't decipher. That's when it hit me. She was my friend's mom, the very same friend who invited me into the fraternity. I was stunned and speechless, and the hilarity of the situation made it even harder not to burst out laughing. So I just went with the flow, and absolutely raw dogged her big fat booty cheeks and nutted all over her giant breasts. I face-effed her for a while. I pressed her head forward. Then I took off the rubber and stuck it deep inside her booty. "Oh my lord," she screams, and I was all in her guts after that.
My wife hates my female best friend. I have a friend called Sarah who I've known since childhood and has been there for me my whole life. I owe her my life and she's always been my go-to when I've problems. We slept once when we were in high school, but that's all. My wife has never liked Sarah since I had her as best woman at my wedding. She calls her a pick-me. She went as far to suggest I cut her out of my life when she became pregnant with her first child, but we worked through it in couples therapy. Their relationship got better when Sarah got married last year, but unfortunately Sarah's husband just up and left a pregnant Sarah, which has made her mental health spiral. Since Sarah has always been there for me, I've stepped up for her by taking her to appointments, building the nursery, and even promising to be with her when she gives birth. My wife has become extremely hostile to Sarah, which has caused fights. To make up for not being there as much as I should, I planned a special birthday for my wife. It was going to be a whole day and night being treated like a celebrity with a fancy hotel, dinner in an expensive restaurant, a shopping trip and a spa. Unfortunately, the same day Sarah went into labor 6 weeks early. She rang me in a bad state begging me to come to the hospital because she was scared. I told my wife everything and she started to freak out and saying it was her day, that Sarah wasn't going to ruin it. I told her to stop being childish. We can celebrate another time, or she could ask a friend to go. Then she told me to not come home without a paternity test for Sarah's child. I'm currently with Sarah in the delivery ward. I've been getting so many angry calls and texts from both our families and friends. Unfortunately, I tried getting in touch with my wife, but I'm blocked on everything. Edit. Hi Warren, this is your wife Ella. First off, Sarah doesn't have a husband because she cheated on him and doesn't know who the dad is. Even your own parents think it is you. Sarah has no friends because she's rude to all the women in your life for no reason. She has slept with or flirted with multiple male members of your friend group. Your male friend group passes her around like a cigarette. I'm currently out at nice restaurant with your mom and sister while your dad boxes up stuff to take to Sarah's. I want a divorce and Sarah to be finally out of my life. My girlfriend announced the end of our intimacy life. My girlfriend recently decided it was time for us to stop being intimate. She is very prone to YAID infections and due to birth control has lost her drive in the bedroom. I suggested to her that she see a doctor about both issues. She has seen a doctor about the YAID infections and gotten a powerful new course of antifungals. Hopefully she'll feel better in a few weeks. She doesn't want to do anything about her loss of drive though, because she doesn't think I inspire her to want to have intimacy. Last night, she told me that she doesn't find me all that attractive, which makes her less interested in intimacy than she was before. She also said that I'm not good at flirting and don't make her feel like wanting to have intimacy, whereas her exes would turn her on with flirting. Moreover, she feels that I have intimacy like a dad and make her feel like a wife rather than a girlfriend. I am devastated. She doesn't understand why I'm so upset and is terrified that I'm going to break up with her. She says she is happy with a relationship with no intimacy and loves me so much and loves how much I care for her and loves all the things I do for her. She tried to initiate last night, and I was so mad that I rejected her for the first time in our relationship. She burst into tears. She had a very active bedroom life for years before she met me. When I met her at 22, she had a body count of 53. She started sleeping at 16 and had a bad relationship which led her into a phase for about 4 years, but I was willing to let it go. But also, even if she thinks it doesn't matter, it makes me feel very low to think that she felt more attraction and interest for her exes, who treated her so poorly in her view. Due to all of these factors, I reflected on the relationship a lot and I broke up with her. I was at her place and I started to pack my bag. She insisted that I leave immediately without packing my bag and leave all of my belongings to her as she thought she owned them. I continued to pack my bag, and then she grabbed my right arm. She then started punching my right arm and even started biting it. She then grabbed my back, and I fell backward and hit my left arm on the edge of her bathtub. I wrestled free of her and got the hell out of her place. Who was the person that you got in bed with that made you go? I never thought this would happen. I was married with a child when a friend of mine started dating the sexiest man I had ever seen. I would visit her Instagram constantly just to drool over the man. He was literally my dream man, and I knew I stood no chance and would never get him. They eventually break up, and I never see his gorgeous face again. He didn't post any pictures on his own social media, and I would still occasionally reminisce how gorgeous he is and only dream to have a man that good looking one day. A few years later, I find myself divorced at 35 with 2 kids and figure I'll have a pretty small pool of men interested. One day I was arguing over the internet about feminism, and a guy was making some dickhead comment, and we went back and forth for a bit. That led to DMs, then text. Turns out he was making jokes in poor taste. He turned out to be a feminist. He just has a dark side of humor and it's hard to read sarcasm over the internet. After a lot more talking and I realized that he was the gorgeous ex of my friend, with the fighting slowly turning into flirting. We met up 2 days later at a bar. We hit it off great and talked about a lot of things. One thing led to the next, and we had sex in my car that night. That night in the cramped backseat of my Altima is still the best sex I've ever had. It literally felt like a dream and I felt like I was 20 again. The chemistry was insane. And he is great in bed. Turns out he doesn't mind being a stepdad to 2 kids either. We have been together for 4 years and got married in October. He's a great dad and a great husband. I still look at him and can't believe I get to have adult movie level sex with him for the rest of my life. What's the worst thing you ever did as a teenager? Around 16 years old, 16 years ago, before handheld screens were a thing. I got drunk alone at my parents', and printed off almost 50 pages of close-up vaginas, and plastered them all over the bathroom wall with thumbtacks. After an awesome 360 degrees wank session, I went to my room and passed out drunk before I could dispose of the evidence. My sister walked into the vagina room before I got rid of it. She still jokingly brings that up, over a decade later, as if that was embarrassing enough. Soon after, my father used the computer for work reasons, and had to use the printer. There was one gigantic vag left in the printer queue, after banana peel wrapped in duct tape. Then I flushed it down the toilet and it actually got stuck. Naturally I was horrified that it would come back up as my dad was sitting there plunging the toilet trying to figure out why it was blocked up. Thankfully it ended up going through and I never had to explain why a duct-taped banana peel was in the plumbing. Used a can of dry shampoo to masturbate with. Only I used the capped end. The lid came off and got stuck in my vag. Took ages to get it out as the edges of the cap were stuck behind the opening. I bled a little. Fingered my then girlfriend in the backseat of her parents' car as we were driving home from her grandfather's funeral. I'd who's more effed up, me or her. My husband and I have been together since high school and there was a rumor he got his penis stuck in a Gatorade bottle. He had to rip it off and thought he broke his penis. His friends would straight on rag on him. I think he confided in one and they told everyone. I never actually believed it, but a couple of years into marriage and he admits it was true. My parents like traveling even though we don't have much money. We finally went to Washington, D.C. so we wanted to spend loads of time. I got super atrony and I nutted in the Lincoln Memorial bathroom. Went off the trail at the Grand Canyon and wanked in the bushes. Redditors who got to live out a sexual fantasy and had it go horribly wrong. What happened? My good friend who is a huge 50 Shades fan mailed me some glass Benoit balls, with instructions to insert them. Wear them out dancing with my BF so they'd get me all turned on. And then surprise him with my newfound kinkiness when we went home. Thankfully I decided to test run those suckers beforehand because either I did something wrong or I have a cooch like a bear trap. They went in just fine, felt pretty nice when I walked around, but I could not get them out. I tried everything, including, in a moment of desperation, a plastic spoon and a syringe full of lube. Nada. After several hours I become more and more panicked and called the nursing hotline at my school. The nurse on the phone assembled a team of other amused nurses who fired off suggestions like squat in the bathtub and poop. And use suction from your vacuum hose. None of their suggestions work, and now I'm in an absolute frenzy. The Benoit balls had been in about 10 hours, and I was beginning to worry that I'd need to go to the ER. Finally, one nurse suggests the ultimate embarrassment. Does your boyfriend have long fingers? Can he come over and help? So yeah, I called my boyfriend to come fish Segs toys out of my vagina at 2 a.m. But this story gets better because as he's driving over, one of the phone nurses suggests I sumo squat and hop down the stairs one at a time. Shockingly, this actually worked. The horrible little glass balls of embarrassment came plinking out onto my hardwood stairs, just as my boyfriend walks in, and witnesses me crouched in a birthing position, naked from the waist down, covered in lube, crying, and these glass balls rolling noisily down the stairs into my living room. Stick to what you know, y'all, and don't take Seg's advice from 50 Shades of Grey.
Males of Reddit, how did you discover your mom on OnlyFans? I was hanging out with my friends one Saturday afternoon, and I guess we were getting pretty bored, so we decided to go on the computer. One of us suggested that we try Googling ourselves to see what pops up, and we did so for like 20 minutes, until one of my friends gets an idea to Google our moms and see what comes up. For most of us, we don't see anything, but when it gets to my turn, I look up my mom, and the first thing that pops up is a corn page on the hub, which was initially pretty shocking. My friend says, "Wow, your mom is named after a corn actress," and we just all roll our eyes. But on closer inspection, we discover that the video was indeed my mom, and I was initially taken aback. She was absolutely getting her booty railed by this taller black dude who had maybe 9 inches of pure manhood. I had to admit, he was clapping them cheeks good, and I looked at the date in which the video was posted, and it was a week before my mom married my father. I was confused if my dad had seen it, but I didn't really care. We discover her OnlyFans page, and I guess all my friends decide to subscribe after I told them not to. How much did you pay the school for a Slurpee. The rumors about this girl, let's call her Lisa, had been spreading like wildfire around our school. She had a reputation, and I guess I was just curious. So I reached out to her, and surprisingly, she agreed to meet me behind the school gym after dark. I handed over the money, and Lisa started doing her thing. But the moment I felt her teeth, I knew something was seriously wrong. It was like getting a sucky from a cheese grater. I winced in pain, but she seemed to be oblivious to the situation. I quickly realized that I'd been ripped off, and this was a disaster. I tried to pull away, but she held on tight, and her grip was surprisingly strong. I was scared and embarrassed, imagining the whole school finding out about this nightmare. In a moment of desperation, I managed to free myself and bolted out of there, leaving my money behind. The next day at school was absolute chaos. Word had spread about what happened, and I was the subject of relentless jokes and laughter. I had paid $200.
My ex cheated on me with 3 guys. Me, 21, and my ex, 20, broke up a month ago. We were together for 4 years. She said she wanted to live her life and have space. I begged continuously for 2 weeks, but something snapped in me. After a week or two, I saw that she made a playlist with the caption "Songs I Want to Get Railed On." So I called her and asked what her purpose is. After nagging and pushing, she said, "Yeah, I did something with someone. Are you gonna stop nagging now?" So I wasn't really sure if she said it to make me stop texting or calling. But my brain couldn't stop. I found her on a dating app. Her bio contained the following sentences: "Guys until 40 years." This made me more furious, so I made a perfect fake dating account and we had some conversations. I needed to know if she cheated on me during the relationship. So I asked her subtle questions. She said that she didn't cheat during the relationship, but that she F'd 3 guys after the breakup within 1 month. I got more and more angrier. She even said that me or ex was on number 3 of who is better. I almost collapsed, but my brain was numb for a second. I felt like a new personality was born, so I stayed calm and went on with the conversation. So I asked for nudes. She sent them immediately. I kept the convo going for a week and cut off all contact. When I texted again, she was excited. "Oh, you are back." First thing I answered was, "Oh, Amber, TF, what are you doing here with those pictures?" Ha ha ha, fake name. She was confused and terrified since her name wasn't stated anywhere. Left it on read and blocked her account. It's been a week and she is still anxious about who got her nudes. That is not the end. I went further and found her nephew. Did the same, and he also sent nudes. After that I dropped the sentence, "Oh, aren't you ex? I know you from school." He answered that he had questions. Did the same, left on read and blocked it. I'd if I should stop my revenge or continue. Maybe I will, since her aunt had a crush on me. What are your best accidental nudity stories? When I was in high school, my friends and all of our dads would rent a houseboat at Shasta Lake in California every summer. During our junior year trip, we took the houseboat way up one of the arms of the Sacramento River, and while the dads were in the boat, my friends and I were all being dragged behind on rafts/tubes/etc. As we rounded a bend in the middle of nowhere, we see a houseboat with possibly 6 to 10 fully naked women sunbathing. There were some life vests buckled onto some of the rafts for handholds, and as we are cruising past, one of them became unbuckled. We moored maybe a quarter-mile upriver, and immediately the dads were discussing who would take the speedboat to go get the life vest back. Upon their return with the vest, they told all of us hormonal teenage nerd boys that the boat was indeed covered in naked women. We decided to immediately set out for a closer look. Unfortunately, the shore was quite steep and covered in shale, so while my friends left with a pair of binoculars, I turned around, hopped onto one of the 3-person rafts, and began paddling towards the naked woman's houseboat. Upon rounding the bend separating our boat from theirs, I suddenly started wondering what the F I was doing. Here I was, an overweight, nerdy, Star Wars obsessed high schooler with little direct woman skills, and I am paddling a beeline for a naked woman houseboat in the middle of nowhere with all of my friends watching and no plan to speak of. I began thinking about what possible excuse could I use to get closer to this naked woman's houseboat, and I remembered our plan to make Spanish rice for dinner. Maybe I could borrow some salt like a good neighbor would? No. How would I get it back to our boat paddling in the middle of an effing lake? I needed to borrow something that could be transported easily, not sound ridiculous to borrow, and be an ingredient in Spanish rice. An onion. I looked back and saw my friends watching through the binoculars and commenced paddling. As I neared the naked woman houseboat, it briefly occurred to me that I must look effing ridiculous paddling with my hands up to this boat while lying on my belly on a 3-person raft. Didn't care. I was so damn close to seeing more naked women than my mind could comprehend. I paddled up to shore and walked up the plank to the front door of their boat and knocked on the door. I have to say this now. This story is true. If I were telling it to you, it might be exaggerated slightly, but typing doesn't give me that luxury. I just want you to keep this in mind as I wind this story up. The door was opened by an absolutely gorgeous and quite naked woman. In hindsight, the whole situation played out as if everything was completely normal. She asked me who I was with a smile, and I told her about our Spanish rice conundrum. She turns to go find an onion, and as she is bent over looking through the cupboards and cabinets, I see a couple of other women just kicking it. They act like I am the second person that day to ask to borrow an onion and go about their business. I think one was reading a book. Right as the naked door answerer says she found an onion, one of the doors in the naked woman houseboat opened, and a man and woman, who were later established to be having sex from the evidence at hand, poked their heads out and asked me what's going on. Making Spanish rice, needed an onion. Cool, and given the onion, I thanked them, hop on my raft and paddle away. We ended up not making Spanish rice, and I kept the onion inside of one of those clear, plastic baseball display cubes until the day it was attacked by ants and I was forced to part with the only physical evidence of one of the best stories of my adolescence.
Dads of Reddit, what did you do to the babysitter after they did a bad job taking care of your kids? I am a 38-year-old dad and hired a 19-year-old female babysitter on Craigslist because I thought she would be a good fit for my kids. My son is easily mesmerized by huge breasts, so I figured she would be a good fit for his taste. As for his sister, who I think may be gay, I thought the same. Anyways, I invited her over and told her I would be back around midnight, as I was going to the bar with some friends. When I get back, my son comes crying to me saying that he witnessed the babysitter pleasuring herself in the bathroom. I am stunned that this could even happen, and I knew I had to take action. So I confronted her, but to my surprise, she started coming on to me in front of my kids. I was just separated from my wife, so I figured this was okay. But I said, "Shoo kids, Daddy's got some business he needs to attend to," and we headed upstairs. She starts passionately kissing me and unzips my pants. While she is giving me head, I could hear someone coming up the stairs, and I think it was my little kids. I was like, holy balls, I am so screwed. But being the risk taker I am, I say bounce on my D for a bit. I need to bust to the babysitter, and she does. Redditors who've had intercourse on a plane, how did it go horribly wrong? A few years back, my girlfriend and I decided to join the infamous Mile High Club during a long-haul flight to Europe. We thought we were being discreet, but things went downhill faster than the plane itself. We waited for the cabin to settle down after dinner service, thinking most people would be asleep or engrossed in their in-flight entertainment. It seemed like the perfect moment, and we figured we had it all planned out. Oh, how wrong we were. As we snuck into the tiny airplane lavatory, we barely had time to get comfortable when the turbulence hit. It felt like we were in a roller coaster, and our passionate endeavor turned into a struggle for survival. We bumped into walls, knocking over toiletries and making an absolute racket. Just as we were starting to regain our balance, there was a loud bang, and the door flew open. The flight attendant, a look of sheer horror on her face, stared at us with a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. We were completely unclothed, and my manhood was sticking out. Not only that, but we were mid-doggy when it happened, which was extra embarrassing. So I was just sticking it in her from behind, and the flight people just stare at us. The
ex-workers of Reddit, what's the weirdest kink a customer has asked you to fulfill? At the GM of a strip club in Atlanta for 12 years, we had this guy come in every Wednesday with a McDonald's bag and go straight to VIP with the same girl every time. This wasn't ever odd to me as we allowed you to bring your own food and even order food while you were there. We had a free buffet during the day and ran the kitchen at night, so it wasn't odd for customers wanting to order out or bring in their own food. The owner did not mind it during the day as it left more free buffet food for the dancers and other customers. On Wednesday I was in the back talking with the dancer, and the dancer that went into VIP with the same guy was there when the waitress comes in and says he had arrived and she needed to head to VIP room 2 ASAP. She laughed and told her to hold on, she had to get her big heels out of her locker. The other girls started to laugh and one said she was jealous of the easy money the other girl was about to acquire. Curiosity got the best of me and I asked her what made the money so easy. She then proceeds to tell me that this guy stops at McDonald's before he comes and gets a quarter pounder with cheese, then puts it in a Ziploc bag, and goes to VIP. Her only job while in VIP was to step on the bag quarter pounder with one heel so it mushed it, and with her other foot to step on the dude's nuts and slap him a bit. She said it was the easiest and funnest $200 she made and looked forward to every Wednesday. Put on her big heels and went to go step on this dude's hamburger and nuts. My mom is dating my bully. My dad passed away when I was only 1. It's been me and my mom ever since. As you can guess, my mom and I were very close. When I was a sophomore in high school, my mom got a part-time job as a gym teacher at my school. I supported her when she asked if I would be comfortable with it. It was extremely uncomfortable when guys would make comments on my mom's appearance. It also gave ammo to Brad, who bullied me in high school. He would make inappropriate comments about her towards me. Brad was a year ahead of me, so I thought I was finally rid of him after he graduated. I was wrong. When I became a senior, my mom started going out very often. Initially, I was happy for her because I wanted her to find someone nice. However, it came to a point where we barely got any time together. To be frank, I thought she was avoiding me. This was because whenever I tried to make plans with her, she had already made plans before. I sort of kept it to myself because I didn't want to come off needy. I didn't complain when she missed my birthday because she was out all night. When she tried to apologize the next day, I told her it was okay. After 6 months of this behavior, I decided to take action. I asked my mom if we could have dinner together, just the two of us. She said she was too busy. I got fed up and told her to stop ignoring me. She said that she wasn't ignoring me but that she had a life to live. That really hurt me a lot. Out of anger, I started to ignore her for a few days. After those days passed, she finally apologized to me. However, she said she needed to talk to me about something important. She wanted to introduce me to her boyfriend at dinner. She didn't sound excited about it. It sounds like she almost dreaded it. When the door rang, my mom opened it up and introduced the guy to me. I was in extreme shock. It was Brad. I almost screamed at my mom, asking her what he was doing here. Brad came forward to acknowledge that this situation was uncomfortable, but he's sorry for how he treated me in school and that he really cares about my mom. My mom asked us to sit and let her explain how this all happened. I remember screaming, "I don't give a FCK about your explanation. You tossed me aside for this piece of SHT. You're a pathetic excuse of a mother." My mom then defended him when said, "Don't you dare call him that." She then said she tried to accommodate everyone in this tough situation by keeping the relationship away from me. She then said, like it or not, Brad is here to stay. If you don't like it, you're more than welcome to leave. I packed my bags right there and then. I called my grandma and told her about the whole situation. She drove to my house and confronted my mom. After a shouting match between them, I left with my grandma. My mom tried calling me several weeks after, but I blocked her. She tried to visit me, but I called the cops on her. After that, she sort of gave up. It had been 2 years since I'd heard from my mom. Then I got a call from her yesterday. She said it's urgent and we need to meet up. I don't know if I should go. Redditors whose marriage lasted less than a year. What went wrong? He went through the police academy while we were engaged and became a member of the police force the week before we married. When we returned from our honeymoon and he was presented with all his service goodies, the guns, the honor badges, etc. His power-hungry, violence-obsessed side decided to make an appearance. He came obsessed with having his way. Everything must go and everyone must do as his plan dictated because he was the law. This mostly impacted me because I instantly became his property. He was also a nasty alcoholic, which he managed to keep secret while in academy. I hoped naively, at age 23, that he would reform with the new responsibility. I was wrong. His favorite habit was to get drunk off cheap vodka and play with his service weapons. When he would go out drinking with his buddies, I had developed a routine of removing the clips from his guns and triple checking to make sure no rounds were in the chamber. I would put everything back in place the next morning before he would go to work. He had always been verbally and mentally abusive. I was stupid. No one would ever want me. I was so lucky that he at least tolerated me. He enjoyed practicing his takedown moves on me. For reference, he was a 275+ pound weightlifter, while I am 5 feet 8 inches, 130 pounds. He choked me out multiple times to the point of losing consciousness. But I was afraid to say a word. He convinced me that I couldn't call the cops on him because I am the police. They won't believe you over me. The straw that broke the camel's back was a night when he went out drinking and came home in the mood for some confrontation. He woke me up demanding segs. I refused because he was sloppily drunk and reeked of cigarette smoke and alcohol. In his anger at my rejection, he dragged me from bed and proceeded to beat me. He had never physically hurt me before. He beat me until the only place that wasn't completely bruised and swollen was my face. He was smart enough to avoid places that couldn't be concealed by clothes and makeup. And then, he took his service weapon, and pointed it at my head, and pulled the trigger. Because I had removed the clip and bullets, his attempt to shoot me was a failure. Enraged by this, the beating continued until he exhausted himself and passed out on the floor. I packed a small bag, grabbed my cat, and left. I filed for divorce a few days later, and never went back. My attorney stood as a proxy for me at the hearing, and I tried to close the chapter on that book. It's been 7 years, and I still have nightmares and difficulty with intimacy. We were married for exactly 11 months.
How did you convince the hottest girl in high school to sleep with you? I was around 15 years old and had a massive crush on one of the football cheerleaders. Everybody knows that the cheerleaders would hook up with the guys on the team, but would not pay any attention to us regular kids. However, while I am in my AP calculus class, I spot my crush. I go up to her and ask her if she needs any help in the course, and luckily she does. I said, I'm hosting a review session back at my place. She agrees to come over, and I drive her over to my house. To pass the time, we start playing some truth or dare, and we get to a question about, I dare you to jump in the pool. She jumps in with no bikini. She says, do you have a spare change of clothes? I'm wet. I say that I don't have one and that she will just have to get bare and use a towel of mine. Hours pass and no one comes, and she says, maybe I should just leave. No one is here for your review session. And I just say, well, you could always spend the night. She says, okay, my parents are out of town. I'll just cuddle up here. Anyways, long story short, I spend the next hour absolutely pounding her big fat booty cheeks and nutting all over her giant knockers. I pull out and we start going at it like two deranged squirrels.
The cute gym employee thinks I'm a trans woman. I'm an Asian guy with a pretty small frame at only 5'5", long black hair, and no facial hair. I'm bulking and going to the gym less since the lockdown, so I'm also chubby, and it seems like I have big man boobs. Since the lockdown is ending, I can finally go back to my old gym. I go in on the first day of reopening. I do my thing on the machines and maybe push myself a little too hard, or I am just that out of shape because I was a complete mess by the end of my workout. I make my way toward the men's room, and this cute gym employee was sanitizing the water fountain in between the men's and women's rooms. I know her. She worked here for a few years now, and I always thought she was the cutest employee here. I even spotted her once when she was off duty and working out. But she stopped me, and she said, you can use that one, pointing to the women's room. And in my exhausted and muscle ache state, I thought perhaps there was something wrong with the men's room and that they closed it off. So I went into the women's room, which was empty since I was one of the last people at the gym, and I take care of my business. When I came out, she said, I think what you're doing is brave. I support you, and I, being stupid, for some reason thought she just meant going to the gym on the first day of reopening. It wasn't until I got to my car that the light bulb in my head finally turned on. She must think I'm a trans woman. The long hair, man boobs, short height, and no facial hair. Now it wouldn't be so bad if that was the only interaction I had with her, but the next day she came over as I was running on the treadmill to introduce herself. And because I have been going to the gym almost every day after opening, she and I have developed a sort of friendship. I wouldn't even dreamed of this before COVID. I was super introverted and shy, and usually just keep to myself during gym. Just today, she asked how long I have been transitioning, and I said since COVID. I don't know how long I can keep this up for. Man wanted me to flirt back, so I did. I'm a 25-year-old male to female trans woman that's been on hormone replacement therapy for 3 years now. My body looks naturally feminine, I have a feminine body, appearance, and voice. I work as a vendor for one of the major beverage companies. I was at a store and stocking shelves of my company's products, listening to music with one earbud, when a mid-30s-year-old bald man walks over. "Wow, girl, you are super thick. Wouldn't mind taking you home with me," he said with a bit too much confidence. I just continue working, ignoring him. He continues, "Oh come on, don't be like that, I'm quite large under these pants if you know what I mean. Something a sweet ass like yours needs." I continued to ignore it, getting very uncomfortable. That's when the music turns to the theme from Halo, and he says what I needed. "Come on, cutie, say something to me." Inspired by the music, I instantly had a thought. It hurts a lot to do a masculine voice, but I needed it. I looked at him with a very enthusiastic smile, and he looked like a kid in a candy store, bouncing a bit. I took a deep breath and went, "Oh boy, I actually got one too. Might be bigger than yours." And then, in the deepest, most masculine voice I could muster, I said to him, "You're cute as well, sure I wouldn't mind having my way with you." Afterward, I started coughing, my throat hurt so much, I was worried the voice sounded too fake, and it wouldn't work, but it did. The dude jumped back a good foot and yelled out, "Oh hell no. Fuck this. Nope, hell no." He ran out of the store so fast, constantly looking over his shoulder as if I was following him. The store workers around me were laughing their asses off. One came up to me and asked, "How did you do that voice? I could never get mine to sound like that." "Oh, you're trans. That makes sense. How am I the homewrecker? I only spent the day with your best friend." So this all started yesterday when I, 22F, had a date planned with a guy. He ended up not showing, and so naturally, I texted the group chat about it. My sister is in this particular group chat. I'm guessing my sister, Sarah, 26F, told her best friend, Jay, 27, about it because a few minutes later Jay texted me to ask if I'm okay. I told him yes, just a little disappointed since I was pretty excited to try that particular restaurant. He said that he would pick me up at noon the next day so we could go eat there. I told him it wasn't necessary, but he insisted, so I agreed, thinking nothing of it. Well, today he took me out as promised, and while we were eating, Sarah FaceTimed Jay. When he didn't answer, she called again, and again. He answered the fourth call and asked her what was going on. She said that she was just checking up on us and told me to call her later. Later ended up being almost 8 o'clock. Jay and I ended up spending the rest of the day together, hunting down some collectible dolls we both like and trying different dessert spots along the way. On the way back to my apartment, Jay asked me to change the music on his phone. When I opened it, I saw that my sister had called him about 30 times throughout the day and texted him across multiple different apps. Jay put his phone on Do Not Disturb after lunch, so it made sense why he didn't see those notifications. Once he dropped me off, I called my sister and asked her if everything was alright. She said yes and asked if I had forgotten to call her back sooner. I told her that I was out with Jay so I didn't get the chance, and figured it could wait since she didn't call me. She hung up, and a few minutes later I got a call from my mom. She sounded angry and told me that I should be ashamed of myself. I said sure, but why today? According to my mom, Sarah called her in tears, saying that she had caught Jay and I having sex in their apartment. I was so fucking confused. I told my mom that I did not, in fact, have sex with Jay, and that I didn't even know they lived together. I asked her to give me a minute and I called Jay, but he didn't answer, so now I'm here laying on my floor wondering what the hell is going on and putting off another conversation with my mom. What is the most disrespectful thing you've seen at a memorial/funeral? My mom showed up at my dad's funeral. They got divorced when I was in my early 20s after the kind of bad marriage where you tell yourself that you're staying together for the kids, but really you're just too bitter to make the first move to end it. When they split up, it was a profound effing relief for all parties concerned. My mom bought a new house and reinvented herself, and dad kept the old place and hit the bottle and cigarettes more than usual. Fast forward 10 years, during which he's kept quiet about my mom and during which my mom has done nothing but trash him at every opportunity. At first, I figured that she was keen to establish that she was the wronged party and shift blame for the divorce onto him, but after a few years, it became something more gleefully pathological. Some people play the victim card, but she played the whole deck. Minor things became forums for digging at him. She told me with a straight face that there were only 4 teaspoons in the kitchen drawer because she'd left half of the cutlery at his house because she was fair and equitable. Unlike him, who said that one thing back in 1979 that she'd never forget. Do you remember? It was when we were on vacation and he refused to look at the map and... Well, you probably get the idea. It had been a decade. We were way past the point of just moving on. Dad got sick and got SHY medical advice. His doctor told him he had sciatica and should take a couple of months off of work, ignoring the clubbed fingers, reduced lung function, confusion, and weight loss that typically comes with untreated small cell lung cancer that's metastasized to bone, colon, liver, and brain. By the time my sister and I got involved, the ship was sinking fast, and after a few more months of utter misery, he filled a glass with scotch, put the game on the TV, called my aunt, and asked her to come over and help him with dinner that evening, and then took his entire month's supply of morphine in one sitting. It probably seemed like the best option, and I really can't fault him on that one at all. He and I had talked funerals on the grounds that the writing was on the wall and there would be no miracle cures for the assorted stage 4 cancers that were competing for the honor of carrying him off. He wasn't a particularly religious guy, but he quite enjoyed church and the rituals and observances that came with it. He had hymns he wanted to be sung, Bible passages he wanted to be quoted, and so on, but he also had one specific request. He didn't want my mom to be there. She'd been nothing but unpleasant to his family since the divorce, and he didn't want any trouble at the funeral. He didn't want to ask her himself. Their limited contact since his diagnosis had been about the dispersal of some property, and her comment on finding out that he had weeks to live was good. After he did the smart thing and took himself out of his misery, I went and talked to her, told her that Dad had this request that he'd wanted me to deliver to her, and that I'd appreciate it as a favor if she'd honor that request. She bridled the idea but eventually came around. We'd go get dinner after the funeral, I told her. I'd cook that pasta that she liked. I had some pictures of her newborn grandson that she hadn't seen. It'd be fun. So it was a surprise when she showed up in a huge red hat and red dress at the funeral at 10 o'clock the following morning, all smiles and laughter and making herself the center of attention. I took her aside, reminded her that we had a deal, and she laughed and said that this was a public place and that she had every right to be there, that he couldn't tell her what to do anymore, and that his family had no choice to put up with it, and so on and so forth. She sat in the front row and spent the entire time grinning as if she just won some kind of effing medal. She sang as loud as she could and smirked/sneered at every solemn moment. There's no denouement worth writing about. Nobody called her on it or made a scene. Nobody lost their composure. She did her thing and we did ours, and when the funeral was over we went to his favorite bar and pretended that we were all so incredibly surprised that a 58-year-old alcoholic who ate crap, never exercised, and smoked 2 packs a day for 40 years could end up ultimately reaping what he'd sown. Mom wanted to come with us, but she'd come to the funeral by cab, and for one mysterious reason or another nobody was able to give her a ride. We drank and made small talk, and by 9 o'clock that night I was in another city eating Indian food with my friend who'd also just lost his dad, and the next morning I was on a 10-hour plane flight home to my wife and kid. Truth be told, I never particularly liked my dad. I didn't feel anything when died. No loss, no sadness. He wasn't a bad guy, but he was a terrible parent who didn't understand kids, and really had no interest in making an effort that way. I always understood that it wasn't his fault, and it wasn't malice, he just didn't have the parental instinct in him. Never taught me or my sister to throw a ball or ride a bike. Never smiled when we drew him pictures. Never glanced at a report card, or showed up at a game or recital. Never, come to think of it, bought a Christmas or birthday present. Never told us that he loved us. And really, that was fine. Those things only hurt if there's an expectation otherwise, and he simply wasn't that guy. It was okay. He was just a guy that we lived with who liked to drink and smoke and watch football and keep himself to himself, like a much older roommate. He was a fixture in my early life, and then he was gone, and it was odd. He didn't care about me and I didn't care about him, but I didn't hate him. But now I hate my mom. People who have been clinically dead, what did you experience in death, if anything? I was dead for 6 minutes. I was laying on the gurney and I was getting colder. Somewhere my body started warming up and everything became really calm and peaceful. I was not longer in pain. All the noise from ER just went away. It was really enjoyable. I was thinking about my daughter and I was remembering all the things we had done. Slowly it was just black and nothing. There was no knowledge of anything. I explain it as it was like before I was born. Then the worst thing in the world is being revived. I started hearing loud noises. I felt this massive pain. Then there was the nastiest stench ever. The smell was like every dead animal had crawled in my nose. The smell was so bad I started vomiting. I remember the doctors turning me on my side and watching my vomit spray on a nurse. Dying was the most pleasant thing I have ever experienced, and being revived the worst. Not really sure what happened, and it still freaks me out to this day. My daughter was 4 and developed pneumonia. Her breathing would stop in her sleep, so we took her into the emergency room. She was there for a total of 5 days. For the first 3 days her health kept deteriorating. And on the 3rd day my girlfriend got a call that her mother had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. She was without oxygen for 20 minutes and was declared brain dead. That night my daughter woke up and asked about Grandma. No one had said anything to her or in the room with her. We asked her what did she mean. She told us that Grandma came to her in a dream and said, "It's not your time yet. I'll go for you." Immediately the next day she was almost 100% better. Friend of mine described it as deeply relaxing and that she could feel herself drifting away, but was brought back just as she was ready to leave. After that, she embraced life and death. She said she doesn't fear death anymore since it was so relaxing to experience. My girlfriend is anaphylactic, and it is triggered by a chemical called salicylate, found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her EpiPen, adrenaline shot, until the ambulance got there. Now obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time, so by the time the ambulance got to her school she was in pretty bad shape and barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her EpiPens, called the nurses effing twats, and loaded her into the ambulance as her mother arrived. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time. Still nothing. They give her a second direct injection of adrenaline, and this time it hits her about 30 seconds later all at once, and her heart fails. She stops breathing. No pulse, nothing. Dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds she was clinically dead. And the scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you are losing consciousness you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't mind it. All despite the fact her mother and the paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously just came back to life almost 3 minutes later as they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart, but to also restart it with a little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still to this day, she can't differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying. What's the best revenge you've ever gotten? A woman rear-ended me pretty badly on my way to work, and I couldn't drive for the next few weeks. She begged me not to call the cops because she was on the way to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and she would lose her license. I was sympathetic, since I had struggled with alcoholism in the past too, and agreed. She called her boyfriend, who was a lawyer, and he told me to let her go and come to his office. He promised to pay cash for all repairs if I brought in an estimate. I did as he requested, but when I got there, the lawyer laughed in my face and said there was no proof and I wouldn't get a cent. I was completely broke and knew I could not afford the repairs. Furthermore, the car was not legally drivable as it was. Late on another night, I went to the AA meeting via bicycle and confronted her on her way out. She confessed her license was suspended and she had been driving without a license that day. Since it was summer, I had days free from class, and rode my bicycle to the lawyer's office for a few days, where I staked out his every move from across the street to learn his schedule. Slowly, a plan for revenge took shape in my mind. When I knew his beautiful car would be unattended for a while, I struck. I filled his gas tank up with sand and sugar, loads of it. I had taken the rear license plate off on an abandoned car I found, and I swapped it with his so they would come up as stolen and expired. Finally, I slashed all 4 tires with a small slit so the air would slowly be gone by the time he was leaving. He came out from his office, saw the car sitting low to the ground and started screaming like a banshee. He pays to get the car towed, they replace the tires, and he drives off, but on his way home, the engine fails eventually because of the sand. So he tows it again, pays for repairs, and drives off but is pulled over for the expired plates. Since he arrogantly never took my information and never even looked at the repair estimate, he didn't know the name of his saboteur. About a year later, I drove by the office and saw that his reserved parking spot was gone. I feel like the woman probably would have done the right thing but she was just mixed up with a jerk. How am I pregnant? I'm a virgin. Yeah, pretty much exactly what the title says. I am 16 and a virgin, so is my boyfriend who's also 16. We're both young, and neither of us are ready for sex. Personally, it's never been high on my radar, and from what he's told me, he's the same way. That being said, we've been together for a couple of years now, so things have still happened. I'd rather not go into detail on that, but you can get the picture. Think third base, I guess. Anyways, a couple of days ago, I went to the doctor because I've been feeling really sick lately. I did a urine test and a finger prick, and my doctor told me I was pregnant. Of course, I laughed at first because I thought she was joking, but no, I'm really pregnant. I kind of fell silent. She started talking about things like ultrasounds, prenatal vitamins, etc., but I cut her off and told her that wasn't possible because I've never had sex, therefore have never conceived. She explained to me that very few women can get pregnant by outercourse, but it's still possible due to vaginal anatomy or something. I was, and still am, in complete and utter shock, so I kinda just left without any further explanation. I had driven myself because both of my parents work. I went straight to my boyfriend's house, and he was the first person I told. I hadn't even texted or called in advance because I was crying, completely distraught. I don't know why, but it didn't even cross my mind that he would think I cheated. I would never do something like that. I explained everything to him about how we'd never technically had sex, but we got really close, and stuff can happen. He seemed pretty lost until I eventually told him I was pregnant. Which is when he rightfully got pissed at me because how the F does that even happen without us having had sex? I tried so hard to explain myself and assure him that I'd never do that, ever. I told him I'd take a DNA test or something to prove that, but he didn't believe a word and made me go home. The last thing he told me was, I really trusted you. He looked like he was about to cry. Now I'm blocked on everything, so I can't text or call explaining myself. I'll respect his decision if he wants to break up, but I need him to know I was never with anyone else. It's been killing me, knowing how hurt he must feel. Luckily, he hasn't told anyone that I'm pregnant because I haven't even told my own parents yet, but he has told people that I cheated on him, and now I'm losing friends and everything's gone to shit. This was already the worst, lowest point of my life, and it seems to be getting worse. I've basically locked myself in my room. I feel so depressed. I just need him to know.
Introverts on Reddit. What was the weirdest thing about losing your virginity? So I'm at this party and we are playing Spin the Bottle. We are all a bit drunk. The rule, whoever the bottle points to, I have to get it on with them in the closet. Sounds wild, right? Well, here's where things take an unexpected turn. The bottle spins, spinning and spinning, my heart pounding in my chest. And guess whose luck shines brighter than a supernova? It lands on the stunning Daisy, a girl I've secretly crushed on for ages. I'm freaking out inside, trying to act cool on the outside. We exchange nervous smiles, and before we know it, we're in that dark, cramped closet. But here's the twist, folks. As soon as the door closes, a power outage hits the house, plunging us into pitch black darkness. Panic ensues, but we manage to find each other in the chaos. Then out of the blue, Daisy lets out a shriek. She is touching my manhood, and it felt so good. However, Daisy thought it was a worm, but I told her it wasn't. She gets on her knees and starts doing her magic. After I received some of the best head in my entire life, we exit the closet. Despite the mishap, Daisy and I became the best of friends.
Do you have any sexy relatives? My mom died right when I was born. She was actually really hot and pretty, but that's not the point. I grew up with my dad's family, because my dad has all sorts of emotional issues, and he bailed before I was born. Growing up I felt like there was always a lot of distance between me and my sister. When I was about 17, I started to notice that my sister was a hottie. I don't want to go into too many details about it, but I accidentally found a video that she made of herself. I knew she didn't make it for me, but I thought she was so fucking beautiful that I watched it 5 times. I probably would have watched it a hell of a lot more, except that right around the time I found the video, all this crazy shit went down, and I had to leave home. My dad's family who I was staying with got in bad trouble with the law. I never talk about it, so I was totally lusting after my sister at that point. She was also having bad trouble with the law. She was actually in custody when I left home. My friend and I went to go pick her up. When I saw her that day, after seeing the video, I have to be honest, I just wanted to fuck her brains out. Looking back on it now, it's pretty messed up, but I think she had feelings for me too. She actually kissed me right after we came to get her. And it wasn't a sisterly kiss, you know? I mean, it wasn't like ridiculously sexual or anything, but it definitely wasn't sisterly. After we left, we all went to crash with my sister's friends. On the trip there, my friend sort of implied that he wanted to get with my sister, and I got a little jealous. He's a good-looking guy, and even though she was my sister, I just felt like he was a competition. Pretty much everyone in my life at that point was wanted by the government, so we all moved around a lot. I'm not saying that I'm proud of it or anything, but it was kind of an awesome time. My friend and my sister never hooked up, I don't think, but I thought there was some serious sexual tension going on between them. It was around that time that I got hurt really badly in an accident. It was fucked up. I almost died. But when I was in recovery, my sister came to see me, and out of the clear blue sky, she started to give me this awesome, slow, passionate kiss on the lips. Sadly, nothing ever came of it. We spent some time apart, and I started to get really religious, so I tried not to think of her that way. It was actually going well for a long time. I was totally over her, but I have to say, like a year or so after all that stuff went down, we were out sailing, not romantically, and she was wearing like the hottest bikini I've ever fucking seen, and it brought back all the old feelings. A little while later, she actually wound up with the sexual tension guy friend from before. I can't say I was surprised, but even after she was shaking up with my friend, there was one time we were at a party. My friend was inside, and my sister and I were outside alone. It was a really intimate moment. I think something might have happened, except that I killed the mood when I told her that Darth Vader was our father and that I had to go face him.